The old man took the wounded wolf to the vet. Then the unthinkable happened. John Riley, a man weathered by time and solitude, lived in a modest cabin nestled amidst the sprawling wilderness of Montana. His life was a quiet routine, punctuated by the rising and setting of the sun, the changing seasons, and the occasional visit to the town center. For supplies, he had always been a private man, content in his own company. His closest companions, the whispering pines and the soaring eagles that graced the vast Montana sky. One crisp autumn morning, as John was chopping wood near the edge of his property, a rustle in the undergrowth caught his attention. He paused, his axe held midair, his eyes scanning the dense foliage. A low growl sent a shiver down his spine. He wasn't alone. Cautiously, he moved closer, his heart pounding in his chest. There, the tangle of fallen leaves and branches, lay a creature that made his breath catch in his throat. A wolf, but not just any wolf. This one was injured, its leg twisted at an unnatural angle, its fur matted with blood. John's first instinct was to retreat. Wolves were creatures of the wild, to be admired from afar, not approached. Yet something in the animal's eyes, a flicker of vulnerability beneath the fierce exterior, held him captive. He couldn't just leave it there to suffer. He took a tentative step forward, his voice a low rumble. "Easy there, fella. I ain't gonna hurt you." The wolf snarled, its teeth bared in a warning, but it made no move to attack. It was trapped, pain evident in every labored breath. John knew he had to do something. He couldn't leave the creature to die. But what could he do? He was an old man with no experience in handling wild animals. The nearest town was miles away, and the only vet he knew was Dr. Emily Carter, a young woman who had recently taken over the practice from her father. Would she even treat a wolf? He looked at the creature again, its eyes fixed on him, with a mixture of fear and desperation. A wave of compassion washed over him. He couldn't just stand there and do nothing. He had to try. With a deep breath, John made a decision. He would take the wolf to the vet, the task of moving. The injured wolf seemed insurmountable. At first, John, though a sturdy man for his age, knew he couldn't simply lift the creature. He rummaged through his shed, finding an old sturdy blanket and a length of rope. Approaching the wolf, cautiously he spoke in soothing tones, hoping to calm the creature's fear. It was a slow, painstaking process, but eventually he managed to gently wrap the blanket around the wolf and secure it with the rope. He carefully lifted the wolf, surprised by its weight. His old truck, a relic from his younger days, was parked a short distance away. With a grunt of exertion, he managed to lay the wolf gently in the truck bed, patting it with more blankets. The wolf whimpered softly, its eyes never leaving John's face. The drive to town was slow and bumpy, the old truck rattling along the dirt road. John kept glancing back at the wolf, worried about its condition. He hoped Dr. Carter would be able to help. He remembered her as a kind and compassionate woman, but he wasn't sure if she had any experience with wild animals. The veterinary clinic was a small single-story building on the outskirts of town. John parked the truck and carefully lifted the wolf. Cradling it in his arms, he walked into the clinic, the bell above the door jingling, announcing his arrival. Dr. Emily Carter looked up from her desk, her brow furrowed in concern, as she saw John struggling with the large blanket. Wrapped form. "John, what's going on? Are you all right? I need your help." "Emily," J.N. said, his voice strained. "I found this wolf. It's hurt." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "A wolf? John, what were you doing with a wolf?" John explained how he had found the injured animal and his decision to bring it to her. Emily listened intently, her expression a mixture of concern and admiration. "Let's take a look at him," she said, leading Jay to an examination room. Gently, they laid the wolf on the table. Emily carefully unwrapped the blanket, revealing the extent of the animal's injuries. The wolf's leg was indeed broken, and there were several deep cuts on its body. It was a male, a magnificent specimen, even in its weakened state. "It looks like he's been in a fight," Emily said, examining the wounds, probably with another wolf. "He's lucky to be alive." John nodded, his heart aching for the creature's suffering. "Can you help him?" Emily met his gaze, her own eyes filled with compassion. "I'll do my best, John, but I need you to understand that treating a wild animal is different from treating a dog or a cat. He's going to be scared and unpredictable." John understood. He knew this was a long shot, but he had to try. He owed it to the creature that had looked at him with such trust in its eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, his voice firm. "Just tell me what I can do to help." Emily worked swiftly and efficiently, her years of training taking over. As she assessed the wolf's injuries, John watched a mixture of awe and anxiety. Swirling within him. He had never been this close to a wild animal before, and the raw power emanating from the wolf, even in its injured state, was both intimidating and mesmerizing. Emily administered a sedative to calm the wolf, its struggles gradually subsiding. She then set about cleaning and stitching the wounds, her movements precise and gentle. John assisted where he could, fetching supplies and holding the wolf steady. "When it's stirred, the leg is broken, but it's a clean break," Emily explained as she worked. "I'll need to set it and put it in a cast. He'll also need antibiotics to prevent infection." John nodded, hanging on to her. Every word. He was amazed by Emily's calm competence, her dedication to her patient, even though it was a creature most people would fear. "He's probably been alone for a while." Emily continued examining the wolf's gaunt frame. "He's malnourished and dehydrated. We'll need to get some fluids into him and start him on a proper diet." As Emily worked, J.N. could help but feel a growing connection to the wolf. He had always been a solitary man, content with his own company. But there was something about this creature, its resilience, its vulnerability, that touched him deeply. "What will happen to him once he's healed?" J.N. asked, voicing the question that had been weighing on his mind. Emily paused, her expression thoughtful. "Ideally, we'd release him back into the wild, but it will depend on how well he recovers and whether he can hunt and survive on his own." J.N. nodded, a sense of sadness washing over him. He knew that returning the wolf to the wild was the right thing to do, but the thought of losing this newfound connection already pained him. In the meantime, Emily said he'll need a safe and quiet place to recover. "I don't have the facilities here to keep him." Jay's heart skipped a beat. He knew what Emily was going to ask. "Would you be willing to take him in, John?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "I know it's a big ask, but I can't think of anyone else who could provide him with the care he needs." John hesitated, his mind wrestling with the implications of such a commitment. He had lived alone for so long, his life defined by routine and solitude. Taking in a wild animal, even a recovering one, would disrupt everything. But then he looked at the wolf lying peacefully on the examination table, its chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. He couldn't turn his back on it now. "All right, Emily," he said, his voice firm. "I'll take him." News of the injured wolf spread through the small town like wildfire. J.N., usually a man who existed on the periphery of community life, suddenly found himself the center of attention. Opinions were divided, some, mostly those who had never ventured far from the town center, were fearful, their minds filled with stories of wolves as ferocious predators. Others, particularly those who lived closer to the wilderness, were more cautious, acknowledging the wolf's wild nature but also recognizing the balance of the ecosystem. JN, carrying bags of supplies from the feed store, overheard snippets of conversations as he walked down Main Street. Heard old man Riley's taken in a wolf. Dangerous, shouldn't be allowed. Poor creature, hope it recovers. He felt a surge of protectiveness towards the wolf now named Ghost, by Emily due to its pale gray coat. He quickened his pace, eager to get back to the cabin and away from the prying eyes, and whispered judgments back at the cabin. Ghost was slowly adapting to his new surroundings. John had created a makeshift enclosure in his barn, providing a safe and comfortable space for the wolf to recover. He followed Emily's instructions, meticulously changing the dressings on Ghost's wounds, ensuring he ate the special diet Emily had prescribed, and spending hours simply sitting with the wolf, talking softly. Building trust. One afternoon, Sheriff Thompson, a burly man with a weathered face and a cautious demeanor, pulled up in his patrol car. John, who was cleaning Ghost's enclosure, straightened up, wiping his brow. "Afternoon," John the sheriff said, stepping out of his car. "Heard you've got a new house guest." John nodded, a wary look in his eyes. "He's recovering. Dr. Carter's been treating him." "I know," the sheriff said, his voice neutral. "Got a few calls from folks in town, concerned about a wolf being kept so close to homes." John understood their concerns, but he also knew Ghost posed no threat. "He's not dangerous, Sheriff. He's injured. Just needs time to heal." "I understand, JN," the sheriff said, his eyes scanning the barn. "But you need to be careful. A wild animal is still a wild animal, and you're responsible for him." "Now," John met the sheriff's gaze. "I understand, Sheriff. I'll take full responsibility." The sheriff nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "All right, John. Just be careful, and let me know if there's any trouble." As the sheriff drove away, John felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He knew he was walking a fine line, balancing his compassion for Ghost with the concerns of his community. He just hoped he could prove them wrong. Show them that Ghost was not a threat, but a creature deserving of their compassion. Life with Ghost was a delicate dance of trust and respect. John, a man of routine, found his days filled with unexpected challenges and rewards. He learned to read Ghost's subtle cues, the flick of an ear, the twitch of a tail, the soft whimper that spoke of discomfort or hunger. He spent hours talking to Ghost, sharing stories of his life, his hopes, his regrets. He felt a companionship he hadn't known. He craved a connection that transcended the boundaries of species. One evening, as JN sat by Ghost's enclosure, reading aloud from a worn copy of Theos, Walden, a commotion erupted from the nearby woods. The hair on the back of his neck prickled. He could hear the frantic barking of dogs, the shouts of men, the unmistakable sounds of a hunt. Ghost, sensing the disturbance, rose to his feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest. John placed a reassuring hand on the wolf's head, trying to calm him. He peered through the gaps in the barn's wooden walls, trying to make sense of the chaos. Suddenly, a young boy, no more than 8 years old, came stumbling out of the woods, his face pale with fear, his clothes torn. He was followed by a pack of snarling dogs, their eyes wild, their teeth bared. John's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he had to act fast. He flung open the barn door, stepping out into the clearing. "Get back," he yelled at the dogs, his voice booming across the quiet evening. The dogs hesitated, their attention shifting to John, but their bloodlust was high, and they continued to advance towards the terrified boy. Before John could react, Ghost sprang from the barn, a gray blur of fury. He launched himself at the dogs, his powerful jaws snapping, his snarls echoing through the trees. The dogs, taken aback by the sudden attack, scattered, yelping in retreat. John rushed to the boy, scooping him up in his arms. "Are you all right, son?" he asked. His voice trembled. "Ling," the boy nodded, burying his face in JK's shoulder. "They were chasing me," he whimpered. "I fell and couldn't get away." John held the boy close, his heart filled with gratitude for Ghost's intervention. He looked back at the wolf who stood guard, his eyes fixed on the retreating dogs. He had saved the boy's life. News of the incident spread quickly through the town. The fear and suspicion that had surrounded Ghost began to dissipate, replaced by a grudging respect, and in some cases, outright admiration. The boy's parents, overcome with gratitude, visited JN, showering him with thanks and bringing gifts for Ghost. The sheriff, too, came to see John, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Seems like you were right about that wolf, John," he said, his voice tinged with respect. "HEK, a hero." John nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He looked at Ghost, who was basking in the attention, his tail wagging gently. The miracle had happened. Ghost had not only saved a life, but he had also changed the hearts of a community. With the shadow of fear lifted, a new chapter began in Jay's life and in the life of the small Montana town. Ghost, once an outsider, a symbol of the wild unknown, became a cherished member of the community. Children, initially wary, now clamored to see him, their eyes wide with wonder. Adults, once apprehensive, now greeted John with smiles and inquiries about Ghost's well-being. Emily continued to visit regularly, monitoring Ghost's progress. The cast on his leg was removed, revealing a healed bone, though still a little stiff. Emily guided John through a regimen of exercises to help Ghost regain his strength. And Mobility JN, in turn, became Ghost's devoted caretaker and companion. He built a larger enclosure, giving Ghost more space to roam and explore. He spent hours each day with the wolf, playing games, practicing commands, and simply enjoying the quiet companionship. One sunny afternoon, as JN and Ghost were playing fetch in a meadow near the cabin, Emily arrived, a thoughtful expression on her face. "John," she began, "I've been thinking about Ghost's future." John's heart sank. He knew what was coming. "He's made remarkable progress," Emily continued, "and he's clearly thriving in your care. But he's a wild animal, John. He belongs in the wild." John nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He had known this day would come, but that didn't make it any easier. "I've been in contact with a wildlife sanctuary. Emily said they have a large enclosed area where Ghost can live with other wolves. He'll have space to roam, to hunt, to be a wolf." John closed his eyes, a tear escaping and tracing a path down his weathered cheek. He knew Emily was right, but the thought of losing Ghost was almost unbearable. When he asked, his voice barely a whisper, "In a few weeks," Emily said gently, "Wick, prepare him, gradually, get him used to the idea of being around other wolves." The next few weeks were bittersweet. JN spent every moment he could with Ghost, cherishing their bond, preparing himself for the inevitable goodbye. He took Ghost on long walks in the woods, allowing him to explore, to scent, to reconnect with his wild instincts. The day of Ghost's departure arrived, and John felt a deep ache in his heart. He watched as Emily and the sanctuary staff loaded Ghost into a specially designed trailer, the wolf looking back at John with an expression that seemed to convey both gratitude and understanding. As the trailer pulled away, John stood alone in the clearing, tears streaming down his face. He had lost his companion, his friend, but he knew he had given Ghost the best possible life, a life of healing, of love, and ultimately of freedom. The silence in the cabin was deafening. John moved through his days in a haze of grief, the absence of Ghost, a constant ache in his heart. He tried to keep busy, chopping wood, tending to his garden, but every task was a reminder of the wolf's absence. The echoes of Ghost's playful barks, the gentle thud of his tail against the floor, the warmth of his fur against John's hand, all were gone, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill one evening. As J.N. sat by the fireplace, staring into the dancing flames, a memory surfaced. It was a memory from his childhood, a time when he had felt a similar sense of loss. His dog Rusty, a scruffy M he had adored, had been hit by a car. The pain of that loss had been so profound that John had never allowed himself to get close to another animal. Until Ghost, he realized that his connection with Ghost had not only healed the wolf's physical wounds, but had also mended a part of himself he had long forgotten. He had allowed himself to love again, to experience the joy of companionship, the comfort of unconditional affection. And while the pain of Ghost's absence was real, it was also a testament to the depth of their bond. He thought of Emily's words, "He belongs in the wild." He knew she was right. Ghost was a creature of the forest, of the mountains, of the vast open spaces. He needed the freedom to roam, to hunt, to live as nature intended. John found solace in the thought that Ghost was happy, that he was thriving in his new environment. He imagined the wolf running through the trees, the wind ruffling his fur, the sun glinting off his pale gray coat. He pictured Ghost with his new pack, playing hunting, living the life he was meant to live one day. As John was walking through the woods, he came across a clearing. He paused, his breath catching in his throat. There in the distance he saw a wolf. It was Ghost. The wolf looked at John, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Then with a graceful leap, he disappeared into the trees, leaving John alone in the silence. But it was a different kind of silence now, not the deafening silence of loss, but a peaceful silence, filled with the echoes of love, of healing, of a bond that transcended the boundaries of species and time. The encounter in the clearing brought a sense of peace to John. He no longer felt the sharp pang of loss, but a gentle warmth, a quiet joy. He knew Ghost was where he belonged, living his true life, and yet their connection remained a silent understanding that transcended distance and circumstance. Life in the small town continued, but with a subtle shift. The story of Ghost, the injured wolf who had become a hero, had woven itself into the fabric of the community. Children drew pictures of Ghost, their crayons capturing his wild spirit. Parents told the story at bedtime, a tale of courage and compassion. Even the old-timers, who had initially been the most resistant, now spoke of Ghost with a grudging admiration. John, once a recluse, found himself drawn back into the community. He volunteered at the local school, sharing his knowledge of the wilderness, teaching children about the balance of nature, the respect due to all creatures. He became a voice for the wild, advocating for conservation, for the protection of the very creatures that some still feared. One day, Emily visited John, a smile lighting up her face. "John," she said, "I have some news. Ghost has become a father." John's heart swelled with joy. He could picture Ghost, now a magnificent alpha male, leading his pack, teaching his pups the ways of the wild. The legacy of their bond would continue, passed down through generations of wolves. As the years passed, John grew older, his hair whiter, his step slower, but his spirit remained strong, fueled by the memories of his time with Ghost. He often sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson, and he would think of Ghost running free beneath the vast Montana sky. One evening, as John sat by the fireplace, a familiar presence brushed against his leg. He looked down and saw a wolf, his coat the same pale gray as Ghost's. The wolf looked up at JN with intelligent eyes, a silent acknowledgement of their shared history. John smiled, a tear rolling down his cheek. He knew it wasn't Ghost, but perhaps one of his descendants, drawn to the place where their lineage had found kindness and healing. He reached out a hand, gently stroking the wolf's fur. The circle was complete. The story of John and Ghost became a legend. In the small town, a tale whispered around campfires, a reminder of the unexpected bonds that can form between humans and animals, the healing power of nature, and the enduring legacy of love and compassion